Mark Curran, thank you for joining us on the Illinois Channel, and you are a candidate for the Republican nomination for the United States Senate, and you hope to be able to represent the Republicans against Senator Dick Durbin come November. We appreciate you joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you for having me, Terry. I like that I'm able to roll out of bed and talk to you.
Well, good to meet you. As
I've been up a long time, actually. I just working around the house.
That's right. We haven't had the opportunity to meet in person, but we appreciate you meeting us online, as it were. And to that end, too, there's probably a lot of people around the state that don't know who Mark Curran is or what you stand for, and that's hopefully what we're going to allow them to see. So why don't we start off by saying who is Mark Curran and why are you running for the U.S. Senate?
Thanks for asking. So my name, as you said, is Mark Curran. We're in my house in Libertyville, Illinois. I'm married to Irene. We have 3 boys, 22, 20, and 15. One just graduated college. He's helping me on the campaign. One's up at Marquette, and one's at Carmel Catholic High School down the street. I was a county, state, and federal prosecutor. Distinguished myself, was recognized, highest ratings, tried over 100 juries, was a supervisor for Jim Ryan in the criminal division, and I traveled the state of Illinois trying cases all over the state of Illinois and one-room courthouses and everywhere else. And I was a special assistant United States attorney, longtime Lake County assistant state's attorney. In 2006, I was elected sheriff of Lake County. I was a Democrat when I was elected as a Democrat. Switched parties in 2008, and in 2010, 2014, and 2018, I was the highest Republican vote getter, any percentage, in Lake County. And Lake County is essentially a blue county. It's the 3rd largest county in Illinois. It borders Cook County. Crook County, as Republicans like myself sometimes refer to it, and it borders Wisconsin, land of cheese and beer. So why am I in it, Terry? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, why, it's not an easy task to run for any office and to ask people for the vote and ask people to donate to your campaign. And it's certainly not going to be an easy task to defeat Senator Durbin. A lot of people, as you, I'm sure, know, think that Dick Durbin is unbeatable in Illinois. So you think differently. What motivated you? What are the primary issues that you thought it's critical that you jump in this race and try to get these issues highlighted?
So, Terry, something I believe very strongly in is liberty. My campaign is all about liberty. You can look at the threads of liberty run through everything that I talk about. You begin with the Declaration of Independence. Not only was I a longtime practicing attorney and a sheriff, which is really the constitutional law officer, I was also a constitutional law professor for a number of years, and I taught constitutional law, and I believe very much in the Constitution. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson writes that our laws are based in nature, nature's laws, and nature's God. That's natural law. The Declaration of Independence goes on to say that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is where we get our liberty from, these documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they're under attack, and they're under attack by Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin is a number 2 in the United States Senate Democrat leadership. He didn't get there by being a bipartisan guy. He's a far left partisan. He will do whatever it takes to maintain leadership. He's much more concerned about what his people want, and his fellow Democrat senators than he is what is good for the state of Illinois. So we need somebody that's going to push back, somebody that can articulate a strong message. That's me. We have our Second Amendment rights, not from some, benevolent government. We have our rights come from God, and they're endowed in the Constitution. And we don't have in America but for the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was the compromise that got enough founders to sign on. So the Bill of Rights were the rights that were given to the people to ensure that they would have liberty. So it's under attack. So you look at right down the line, First Amendment, clearly religious liberty is under attack. Second Amendment, our right to bear arms is under attack. You go down the line in the 10th Amendment, the reserve clause to the Bill of Rights, where all powers not expressly stated in the Constitution are reserved for the states. We have this big behemoth federal government that keeps encroaching on people's lives. They're tired of it. You know, and I'm somebody that's running against that. When you look at socialism, what is socialism other than the usurpation of liberty? You can have a government tell you, you know, that everybody's going to make essentially the same. The government's going to tell you what job you can have. It's going to take away all of our freedom, and that's the direction we're headed. A lot of young people subscribe to the concept of socialism because they don't understand it. But the same data shows that a lot of young people also subscribe to the concept of entrepreneurship. And that's something that I'm going to be pushing for, Jerry. You look at Dick Durbin, crony capitalism. You know, the Jeff Bezos, those are the guys that fund Dick Durbin. The Democratic Party is the party of crony capitalism. So they have an unfair advantage. We need somebody that speaks to economic issues and understands the fact that we need to start supporting small businesses. Less regulation, less litigation, less taxation. Let's even the playing field. Let's give them a chance. We're sick, and we have to enforce the antitrust laws. You know, I could go on about healthcare
Well,
and why single
let
payer
me,
health.
let's break this down into some bite-sized pieces. What's
Sure.
interesting, I always think it's interesting for us to know something about the person, and you shared some of your background there, so that all of us bring to the table, so to speak, our life experiences. So you as a federal prosecutor, now you as a former sheriff, one of the issues that we are going to be focusing on relative to those issues is kind of the criminal justice issues. We have the governor saying criminal justice issue is going to be one of his primary things. You have certain people, as you well know, who want to have more and more controls on guns, and saying that the way to control the violence in places like Chicago, as we see it, and other places, is to have more controls on guns. With that in mind, you have been the prosecutor, you've been a sheriff, you've sent deputies out to combat crime and in all of its manifestations in Lake County. So why don't you share your thoughts based upon those experiences, both as a person who enforced the law and as one who was a prosecutor who kind of dealt with law breaking after the fact?
Great question, Terry. So not only was I elected sheriff, but I did every job in the office. I went to the police academy. I went to the FBI academy. I went everywhere. I got all the training. I worked on patrol. I worked in the jail. I did all of that. And so when you ask about guns and what it's all about, you know, Jesse Jackson and Michael Flager and his caravan came to Lake County a couple times. And if you Google me, you'll see that I address them as to the real causes of violence in the streets of the city of Chicago and other major cities. It's not guns being sold in Lake County, Illinois. I mean, that's a bunch of nonsense. I was one of the first proponents of any sheriff for concealed carry. I very much believe in it. I very much believe in the Second Amendment. And we know that the bad guys are going to get guns. You know, just like they're going to get drugs, they're going to get what have you. And we have a society that's increasingly violent, and a lot of that is because of the agenda of the left. It's destroyed the family. It's pumped all this garbage out there, and what have you. So Americans want to be protected, and that's what the Second Amendment does for them. As far as you know, beyond that, Terry, you know, you mentioned my background in criminal justice. Can I talk about that for just a little bit? Okay, so I have a plan with regards to keeping America safe, and that's one of the things I am running on. So the reality is, Terry, that in America today, 1 in 100 Muslims believe it is always okay to engage in violence that kills innocent civilians in the name of Islam. It's according to the Pew study. 7% believe it's sometimes okay. Those numbers are higher for Muslims living in Europe, and they're much higher, obviously, for Muslims living in the Middle East. So we don't treat all these people, you know, like they're horrible, what have you. But there is an element within that community that's extremely dangerous. I understand that. I'm somebody that has a plan for keeping America safe, for living in the real world, talking about these real issues. The border has to be secured. Fentanyl and opiates are killing our young people. They're not being, you know, that stuff's not indigenous to America. It doesn't come out of our soil, so it has to come across the border. And we have to have border security, and that is absolutely paramount. And one of the problems, I'm somebody that historically, wanted to support Dreamers and DACA, but the reality is that the left has shown that they have no interest in keeping America safe. So, I mean, the reality is we can't do anything for anyone right now because that's the only leverage we have to try to force them to fund immigration customs enforcement, border patrol, and any type of border security that we desperately need to keep America safe because we're living in extremely dangerous times. So, you mentioned the inner city Chicago, Terry, if you want me to address that. So I'm friends with so many people in the
Yeah,
FBI.
I think, look, not specifically. I mean, I think, how do we address crime? And if you have some specific programs, I'm not trying to, I want you to talk
No,
about your policies. I would say this, you might include in your answers, which I think would be interesting. When you are an attorney and you were a prosecutor, as you said, at various levels of government, and then you became a sheriff. I think that's probably fairly unique. Maybe not unheard of, but probably fairly unique. I'm curious. Were there any things that you learned when you were wearing a badge that you didn't appreciate when you were a prosecutor? Uh, that might be interesting, and how those two life experiences come together to form your approach to policies.
so when you run an office like I did, essentially we had about 600 employees. I had 8 different unions that I had to negotiate with on a regular basis, and I was under budget 12 years in a row. So I was kind of the guy that said, no, we can't do that, and no, we can't afford that, and no, we're not going to give you that. So it was a tough job from the perspective of you need somebody that's a strong leader, somebody that's able to say no, somebody that's not obsessed with being friends with people. So that was me. As far as what I learned from going from a prosecutor to being a sheriff, I had always great respect for what law enforcement does, police do. And I think it was heightened in that job. Clearly, they have an incredibly dangerous job. And they need a lot of societal support, and they need support all over the place. I mean, you see the divorce rates, you see the addiction to substances is much higher in law enforcement community. It's just it drains you, and the shift work and everything else. So our society needs to get behind law enforcement, needs to get behind the police, needs to back them up, it needs to give them the benefit of the doubt. It does not need to have them on trial all the time. I'll say this much: they have a tougher job, but they're like every other profession. There's good and bad. I mean, there's the fact that somebody has a gun and a badge doesn't make him a great human being. I mean, I've dealt with my share that we're not so great that we're in my office, but they have a tougher job than most. I support them, and I support the job they're doing. Can I just and so with regards to the city of Chicago, because I think it's really important, and people can think what they want about Donald Trump, but I would ask people out there if they know somebody, and I know so many I can't even, I know them all, with the FBI and with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and with ATF and on all the federal law enforcement agencies. In 201, they will tell you that they love Donald Trump. And they believe that Donald Trump has had their back and that he supports them and he wants them to do their job. And part of why they love Donald Trump so much is that Donald Trump believes in these things, but it's also because he comes on the heels of Barack Obama, who was the exact opposite. And they'll tell you that they felt like he never had their back, that he didn't want them to do their job, that he was worried about, upsetting certain communities and what have you. And they really felt handcuffed under Barack Obama. So we need, a U.S. senator that gets it, that understands that Americans need to be kept safe. I have plans, I have ideas as to how you could stop some of the gun violence in the city of Chicago. We have roadblocks for alcohol, DUI weekends where we potentially think there's a problem. We stop every 5th car and we see if they're under the influence, and if we have a reasonable suspicion that leads to probable cause, we can move from there. Similarly, we could do that in the inner cities where we could have we could set the police up and just stop and frisk as people come down the street. Every so many gets stopped. You'd have to put it out that you're doing that. You know, that's what's required by the Constitution, is that you declare you're going to be doing this in advance. But you know, we can't handcuff our police if we want to be kept safe.
And you would argue that, what about the argument that so many people, including the governor and members of the legislature, a lot of members of the legislature, say that we want to toughen controls on guns. We want to have more regulations. We want to make it harder for people to get a FOID card. As we sit here, there is a legal case moving through the courts. It's, a lower court has ruled in Southern Illinois that the FOID card is unconstitutional. And
Right.
that'll go to the Illinois Supreme Court at some point. Just give us your thoughts on that approach that you know is out there, and I presume you think that approach is wrong. What's wrong with the argument that we just ought to have more regulations on gun and make it harder for people to get a gun?
So Terry, that's failed. I was down in Madison County last night, and what you're talking about in terms of getting rid of the FOID law, there's almost no, I don't remember exactly, but I think there's 40 some odd states that don't have a FOID law. You know, Illinois has gone down this route. The most gun laws in America historically has been the city of Chicago. The most violent place in America historically has been the city of Chicago. There's not a correlation. It's total nonsense. And ultimately, the rest of us, because Chicago is such a disaster because of its liberal recipe for, you know, no family, no nuclear family, liberal policies that have destroyed the nuclear family, have destroyed the culture. The rest of us, when we go to Chicago, we want to feel safe. So we want to carry. So that's the world. The liberal policies, essentially, they always have some type of a false agenda that's not supported by logic and reason. And you know, at the end of the day, I could talk to you. Planned Parenthood clinics are in all throughout the major cities in America. They're in Chicago, all over the place. And you're going to tell me that there's value in the sanctity of human life when, you know, young minority kids, and this is who Planned Parenthood preys on, take their, because of the lies that they've been fed, they take their girlfriend to get an abortion, and then somehow they're supposed to disconnect that from their thought process on the sanctity of human life. So when somebody can do that so easily, it's not a big pull down the window and fire at the car next to them. I mean, that's, you know, there's a connection there. Life is precious. Life is sacred. The fact that those people in Chicago don't get it, I'm sorry. You know what? The rest of us need to be kept safe from you because we do get it.
Let's look at some of the other items out there. Was there anything particularly, first of all, I think it's interesting that you said earlier on that you used to be a Democrat and you switched over to the Republican Party.
Right.
Why did you do that? Why did you go from identifying as from one party to the next?
So like I said, Terry, you know, I was
And let me throw in here too, for those Republicans who go, wait a minute, this guy used to be a Democrat, I don't know if we can trust him. You might just incorporate some of those, address
Right,
those
sure.
fears.
So, you know, I mean, my dad was a Democrat. He was a labor lawyer, city of Chicago, and my parents were both South Side. I lived on the South Side for a while. Everybody, you know, a lot of, to some extent, it was a cultural thing. But I ran as a Democrat in 2006. But when I ran for the first time for office in 2006, I was endorsed by the Lake County Right to Life, the Illinois Right to Life. I had voted for George Bush for president. I understood that ultimately, if I believed in the sanctity of human life, if I believed in liberty, then you know, the Republican candidate for president was the only one that was going to be able to protect that. So that was my rationalization at the time. As the Democratic Party went further to the left, and I saw it, I switched. So I got nothing out of it, Terry. Barack Obama had carried my county by 60. It was 61%. My county is the bluest of the collar counties. Donald Trump lost Illinois by somewhere around 17 points. He lost my county by 21 points. The trend was in advance of 2006. It was in advance of 2008 when I switched. I didn't care. I did it on principle. So, and you know, why was I a Democrat? You know, quite frankly, in Lake County, it was kind of a little bit of a closed shop, the Republican Party was. It was a little bit of a fraternity where, they would pick the nominees and the candidates and what have you. And I didn't like it, I didn't see much opportunity. And quite frankly, they didn't stand for much back historically. The Republican Party did. And you look at my old boss who's supporting me, who says wonderful things about me, Jim Ryan. He was the first Republican nominee for governor that was pro-life in the state of Illinois. And it took, all the way until 2002. Yeah, thank you. So the Republican
2002
Party,
is what I said.
right. So, right, you were right. Yeah. So people that were from outside of Illinois, the Republican Party was, in many ways, was left of the Democratic Party historically. You look at Bouchard and Hardigan, and a lot of those guys were right of the people they ran against.
Do you find when you're out campaigning and talking to people, one that there's a similar movement as far as people who were historically Democrats moving to the Republican Party? What kind of response? Donald Trump is a person who is interesting because he so energizes both sides of the aisle. The Republicans, you see his rallies, he packs the places, 17,000 people cheering, and similarly, all the people on the Democratic side of the aisle just can't stand the man.
Yeah,
No one seems to be neutral on Donald Trump. In that environment, when you go out and campaign and you talk to people, what are you hearing from the people, and what's the feel of campaign 2020 on the ground?
So Terry, that's awesome. The question, and so I brought up Madison County, and that's where I was on Monday night. I was down in Madison County, and Chris Slusser, the treasurer down there and former party chairman, endorsed me. And, I met with Jeremy Plank, the chairman that took after him, and then Ray Wesley, the chairman that took after him. So Madison County was known for two things historically. One, the largest lawsuit verdicts anywhere in America. So if you're a plaintiff's lawyer, you went to Madison. I told those guys when I lost my sheriff's race, I was thinking of moving down to Madison County and looking around for some people to sue, because they would throw money around like crazy. Madison County was also known for incredible corruption. They used to refer to it as the Dukes of Hazzard version of Cook County. And Madison County was blue as you can be. And it went for Donald Trump by 17 points. And it is becoming just there is so much Republican energy down in Madison County. And as they've thrown the Democrats out, they've resurrected that county where it's a place where people want to go to. I mean, they're still fighting taxes that Democratic policies have saddled them with, but that place is on fire. That is a Republican hotbed. That energy is moving. And Lake County, we tried it with Madison County, like Donald Trump, they lead with the social issues. And that's really where the Republican Party is at in Illinois right now. You used to be told, well, you're pro-life. Okay, well, don't tell anyone that. Just tell them about economics only. Well, they don't believe that. They want to know, what's your core? What do you really believe? And so they want to know if you're pro-life or not down there. And they want to know where you stand on all these issues so that they can get a sense for what, how you're going to lead. And my sense is that Donald Trump is bigger than any factor in America right now, and certainly for the movement in the Republican Party, the energy in the Republican Party, the fight in the Republican Party, absolutely, it's Donald Trump, and the energy is with him, and Donald Trump has truth on his side. That's why he wins.
Years ago, in 2003, I interviewed Barack Obama when he was then seeking the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate. No one thought he was going to get it at the time I ran. And I bring it up because, of course, neither he nor I realized that he was going to be the next president of the United States. And it never occurred to me to ask him, where were you born? Which would have been interesting had I asked him back then. So I say that because every time one does an interview, you never know, gee, I wish in retrospect I would have asked him this. And by the way, I'm not suggesting anything about the birther issue. I'm just saying, when you do an interview, you never know what you wish in hindsight.
Right. Sure.
There's the voters out there, if they made you the next U.S. Senator from Illinois, might say, boy, I wish I would have known X. So let's just say on taxes, I presume you're for low taxes. You're
Right, right.
pro-gun. You don't think as we talked about, the regulations are going to be really helpful in bringing down crime. Um, on healthcare, I've talked to a number of candidates who said the number one issue is for what they hear is healthcare, and another candidate has told me that it's immigration reform. Why don't you talk both quickly your thoughts on immigration and healthcare? Obviously, two separate issues, but where you stand on those issues.
Right. So, what I would say, the number one issue, okay, this is not you know, running for U.S. Senate is not writing a horn book or a medical treatise or what have you. It's getting people motivated to fight for what's important, and that's liberty. I ran a multi-million-dollar healthcare budget at the Lake County Jail, and I understand healthcare very much, and it's a messed up issue and what have you. And part of the reason, Obamacare was, 20,000 pages or something like absurd. And um, it has a lot of problems, and people don't understand it. What's the role of the insurance company? What's the role of the hospital? What's the role of the treating physician? And how is these intertwined? And what's going on here? And it's really a convoluted process. We need to simplify it. One of the things that President Trump is pushing towards in terms of healthcare is having the costs of services posted. Nobody knows, it's a sham game where you walk in and I need a shoulder surgery. How much is it going to cost? Well, I can't tell you. We got to find out how much, the insurance, and there's so many variables at play and what have you, and that leads to uh, big problems. There's a lot of waste there as a result. Also, we need tort reform. Clearly, that when you have doctors always practicing preventative medicine, and not preventative in the sense that I'm going to keep you healthy, preventative in the sense that some lawyer is going to try to file a sham lawsuit against me. And that's why Illinois is so hard on businesses, because it's so friendly to trial lawyers, and we got to stop that. But transparency will go a long ways. I'm working with a great team on healthcare proposals we put up. We had a roundtable the other night, and we got to protect pre-existing conditions. We've got to drive down costs, obviously. But I think the transparency, posting the costs of that, will be very important.
And
With
what
regard to
about
immigration,
immigration? We talked about,
yeah. So
people often say, uh, correctly, we are a nation of immigrants. Um, just, people also, I hear, I don't know the details, but I often hear how just long it takes for people to come in, how expensive it is. It seems more than likely we need a lot of reforms within immigration. Uh, but give us your thoughts on that. Obviously, do you support the wall? As a former law enforcement officer, former federal prosecutor, what kind of threat do you see from immigration, if you do indeed see a threat? So just give us a good overview of where your thoughts are on that.
so Terry, what I would say is that I support the wall. I think you'd have to do a lot more than the wall. The wall is a great symbol of our sovereignty, though. We are a nation that has been able to bring so much good around the world, protect liberty around the world, what have you. But we're a sovereign nation. You don't just get to, come in here and what have you. So in the world we're living in right now, it's even more important, as I talked about, the violence and the danger that potentially comes over the border. So I support the wall, but we need to do a lot more. I agree with President Trump. When people come to from certain regions of the world, we need to vet them. And, President Trump has the FBI over there vetting people now before they come into this country. That's not, I don't think people are always aware of the fact that that's being done, but he's right. And, when he says we got to take a closer look at people when they come from certain countries and certain regions, he's spot on. So he lives in the real world where there's people that, my son, I know he's talking to you off the line the other before you and I got on. My father-in-law was a Christian growing up in Baghdad. That was a Christian nation. Those were all Christian nations in the Middle East. You know what? They burned down their churches. They burned down their homes. They drove them out. They had them flee. Well, they're not going to do that to America. We're not going to let it. Donald Trump's not going to let it happen. So, talking with a good friend of mine who lost his election, who was a congressman, we were talking about Dreamers and DACA and all that. He's like, yeah, I wish we had gotten it done, but we can't do anything right now because the minute we do that, then they're just going to plug their ears up uh, when we start talking about border security and keeping America safe, because they really have no interest. So it's unfortunate for those people, but the only leverage we have over the left is, uh, you know, the people that are in limbo, and it's a sad reality, but that's the way the left operates right now.
As we
So
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say on immigration, Terry, I have been in Paul Ryan's office. I've been in John Boehner's office. I've been in Lindsey Graham's office. I've been, immigration. I could talk to you for days about what happened. I could tell you for days why the 2013 bill failed. The Hastert rule, 62-38 out of the Senate, and it died in the House. And but ultimately, at the end of the day, America has to come first.
Did you see as a law enforcement officer any impact from illegal immigration into the country?
So I would say yes, but by the same token, I think that there's a
I mean,
lot of spin going
and
on.
maybe you didn't because Lake County is not like, on the border with Mexico or something, but
Well, actually, Lake County is, they call Waukegan the little Mexico. And in Lake County is 21% Latino. We probably have as big an immigrant population as there is. And people coming from those Mexico and those South American countries are primarily peaceful, wonderful people that, but at the end of the day, we have to secure our border. We have to keep America safe. We can't just keep letting people come and go. I mean, that's historically we had there was a sign at the border. They say historically it said, do not enter, but there was a much larger sign that said help wanted. And we didn't enforce the sign that said do not enter. And so they came in here, and now, we have a little bit of a mess on our hands.
I won't keep you much longer, but as we sit here, I just got a news flash that President Trump is signing the USMCA, the new trade deal with North America,
Mexico and Canada,
which
yeah.
impacts to some extent the immigration issue. It impacts a number of things. As a fellow who grew up in a Democratic household, I think you said your dad was what? Was he a union guy?
He was no, well, he was a labor lawyer. He eventually wound up with a big firm, Sidley and Austin. He was law school classmate of Dan Walker, and that's actually how we wound up in Lake County. He was godfather for his oldest daughter.
Uh, what are your thoughts on trade and how the president is handling trade? Obviously, I as a political junkie, as someone who has followed politics most of my life, I would say to people that they should look at the Trump administration in a every presidency is historical, but what Trump is doing is diverting the direction of the Republican Party from where it had been going for a number of years. And
Exactly.
the USMCA is one example. His use of tariffs, which is totally against what had been Republican policy. You never use tariffs. Smoot-Hawley added to the Great Depression, which I think it did. But talk as you will on trade, on creating jobs, on how we should be dealing with countries, like Mexico, like Canada, like China, and the rest of the world. And where do you see, as a U.S. Senator, how would you be representing what the United States' role is within the world vis-a-vis our worldly neighbors?
Terry, great question. And I think what Donald Trump is doing is absolutely right. He totally gets it. And obviously, we need free trade. We're all better off with free trade. There's things that America can do better and cheaper and what have you. And with 3% unemployment, I mean, why would we be building factories to make something that we can get somewhere else in hurting ourselves economically? That doesn't make any sense. There's things America does better than other countries. There's things that other countries do better than America. That's why we have free trade. Free trade is essentially a good thing. But unfair trade, as President Trump talks about, where China dumps their goods and they undervalue their currency and everything else to try to destroy us. And China's end game is to destroy America, just like, radical Islam's end game is to destroy America. That's why, you look at Onar and I'm forgetting the last name of the woman from Michigan. Why are they in favor of abortion on demand, gay marriage, what have you? the reason why they're in favor of those things, Terry, is because not because they represent Muslim beliefs, but because their end game is to destroy America. That's what they want to do. China's end game is to destroy America. Those Democratic congresswomen, their end game is to destroy America. And so what President Trump did with China, totally spot on, needs to be done, we're not going to get bullied around anymore. And, this is why President Trump leads with the social issues like they do down in Madison County, Illinois. And then his economic message is not one of Darwinian capitalism. It's a populist message. Mitt Romney said, 47% I have no chance with. And it's in part because of the entitlements and in part because of the disparity in wealth and income. And President Trump wants more entrepreneurs, what I talked about earlier. He wants to build people up, to have the, shrink that disparity so that the emotion of greed, which is a very powerful emotion, and that's what the Democrats play on. And as Republicans, we got to be real about that's a big force coming at us. Not greed, I'm sorry, envy. And so I like everything he's doing. I like everything he's doing in terms of trade, tariffs when necessary, and and taking some of these garbage agreements that Obama gave away our America's best interests on and rewriting them. He's a great president, Terry.
Let me clarify, and maybe I misspoke, just so people know. How do you pronounce your last name?
Curran.
Curran. Okay.
Curran. Yeah. So you're a Central Illinois guy. It's an easy name up this way. There's a lot of us.
Well, Mark Curran,
John Curran's in the state Senate from Naperville. Awesome guy, South Sider. Yeah.
We appreciate you taking the time. The primary is March 17th. And,
my day, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, exactly. Easy date for us all to remember.
Right. Don't think that St. Patrick's intercession's not going to.
I don't think they're going to close the bars on this election day, though.
No.
Mark Curran, we appreciate you taking the time. We don't want to go too long with you, but hopefully you've had the chance to share your ideas so that people have a better idea who you are and what you're about. We put up your website, so if people want more information and you put your policy papers up, they can go there and look. And we appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Good luck to you.
Terry, I've been watching.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I've been watching you for years, so it's an honor to be on with you.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Terry. Take care.